From World War II to the present, the 318th Fighter Interceptor Squadron has served with distinction. In August of 1942, the unit was activated. Composed of 23 pilots flying P-40 Warhawks, they first saw action in Algeria and later Italy. The Green Dragons were the first F-106 squadron to operate overseas when, in support of Combat Fox in 1968, they deployed to Osan Air Base, Korea, in response to the Pueblo crisis.
We went to 1968 when the Pueblo crisis occurred. We were at that time they had one squadron, one air defense squadron that was sitting on worldwide alert. And we happened to be the squadron that was at worldwide alert at the time that incident was created by the North Koreans, and we were called upon to go. And they come down to all the civilians in the squadron and said, you know, we're looking for volunteers to go with us. They needed technical people, and I volunteered to go, and I went to Korea. I was only civilian, went to Korea with the fight with 318. Well, we were quite a ways from where the Pueblo was captured, but we were only about 34 miles from the DMZ. So we were very, very close. We often laughed about it. If the North Koreans put aircraft airborne and all of a sudden decided to come south, we'd had a tough time trying to get anything in the air before they'd hit us, because you're just too close. 34 miles isn't very far, not when you're traveling 400, 500, 600 miles an hour. The first thing that happened is I was about 24 hours behind most of the squadron, because it took longer for me to get a passport, and I had to have a passport to get to Korea. So I flew from here to San Francisco to Hawaii to Okinawa, Okinawa to Japan, because I had to go to Japan to get the Korean embassy in Japan to sign off on a visa entrance to get into Korea. And then I come back to Okinawa, and they put me on a 130, and I went to Korea. I got off the airplane, and the chief of maintenance met me within the hour and said, I got serious problems. None of the shop equipment's working, because the base commander says that they don't have enough power here. You need to go over to CE and see how you can solve it. So I went over there, and they said they had 1 kW of power available for us. We needed 52 kW. In other words, they had 1,000 watts of power, and we needed 52,000 watts of power to run things. So we sit down and brought some extra wires in to get some lights hooked up that we would have. And we ordered special diesel generators out of Japan that they flew in the next day and run special wires so we could get the system working. We only had 30 days worth of spare parts to start with, and just didn't have enough parts. We had airplanes that had the IR systems, infrared systems, that was not working. So we had that airplane loaded with all radar missiles, and then we had the airplanes that the radar wasn't working. We had that loaded with all IR missiles. So just because we had spare part problems. We did things and fixed things over there you wouldn't dream of doing when you was in the States. We had aircraft patrolling up on the DMZ all the time. So if any activity did occur, of course, they would pick it up right away. But we knew that we were standing at the edge of something if something did happen, but I don't think that crossed anybody's mind. Again, it was there to do a big job. I can tell you an incident that happened over there that gives you an idea of what this squadron's about. I got there in about the 4th or 5th day I was there. All of a sudden, all over the base, on the sidewalks and on doors, there was a decal showed up that showed the picture of the doghouse with a little character Snoopy on it, with his scarf flying in the breeze, and the caption underneath it said 318th FIS. And they found that on airplanes, other airplanes that was on the base at Osan, not ours, but on other airplanes. They found it in the Officers Club, the NCO Club, on sidewalks, everywhere. The squadron was close-knit, very close-knit. The guys lived in tents. We lived in tents for a short period of time while they were trying to get barracks put together. The alert pilots lived in tents right down at the end of the run-up pad where they'd run the engines up at night to test them, and they slept with earmuffs on. No, it was full. Matter of fact, we brought 6 extra airplanes into the area here And the day that we launched the aircraft out for Korea, we launched 24 airplanes. And there was 18 from the 318th and 6 from another squadron, or other squadrons. We launched 24, and the idea was that if we had any problems with any of our airplanes, they could turn around and these other people would be able to take airplanes along with them, with an idea whether we was going to put 18 airplanes over there. We didn't have any of our airplanes turned around. Sometimes reporters report, and television reports, and newspapers report the hostility towards Americans. I never saw that hostility anywhere I was overseas. I never have seen that. One of the things that happened, when we left here, just prior to that, the base had been transferred to Military Airlift Command. And at that time, we still had a wing maintenance complex here for Air Defense Command. We had the 325th Cameron Squadron. That's where all the maintenance people were located. And we had the 318th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. That's where all the ops people were located. So we gathered all those people out of that organization, the 325th and 318th, and they all went over as the 318th. When they come back as the 318th. They were close-knit, and it has never changed since then.
The basic pilot training lasts 48 weeks, 48 or 49 weeks. In that training course, you fly 2 different types of airplanes, the T-37, which is the basic jet trainer, and then the T-38, which is sort of the sports car of the Air Force training world. That's the high-speed, more maneuverable type airplane. And that's where you go out and you start flying some tactical formation. You always fly formation in both airplanes. And then from the T-38, you go to, when you get a fighter assignment, then you go to what is called fighter lead-in training. And that's done at Holloman Air Force Base. They use a T-38 because that's the last airplane you flew in pilot training. But now they go out and they start doing fighter-specific type tasks, like more tactical formation flying, some close formation flying. They teach you the rudiments of BFM, basic fighter maneuvers, okay, aerial combat. And they'll also teach you some ACM. Now, guys who are going, that's for the air-to-air course. Now, guys who are going to the air-to-ground type airplanes, they also do some basic bombing and strafing with that airplane. So you can get, it's sort of a fighter pilot indoctrination, I guess, at the fighter lead-in course, and that lasts about 2 months to 2.5 months, depending upon what kind of airplane you're going to go to. Then after that, right out of pilot training, 2 months in fighter lead-in, then you go right to RTU, and that's the fighter schoolhouse. That course for a brand new guy that's never flown a fighter before lasts about 6 months for the F-15. And it's around 40-some sorties, and a lot of academic instruction, a lot of simulators. The simulator periods last for 2 hours. When the Air Force laid out the simulator program, they said that a simulator period, or a training sortie, as it were, in a simulator, should last about the same length of time as a sortie would. So we spend about 1.5 hours to 2 hours in the simulator every time we go over there. We have a requirement for 6 simulators a half. That's operational. Now, in mission qualification training, which is what we put a pilot through after he gets here from the schoolhouse, the replacement training unit, RTU, that's a program of about 5 or 6 sims, and there's an evaluation check ride at the end of that simulator program. After he's mission qualified, or MR as we say, mission ready, he's required to get 6 simulators every 6 months. Those are calendar months. And that's pretty much what all guys do in the simulator. The simulator is a good machine for replicating the emergency procedures that you can find in the airplane. There's about 125 to 130 different emergencies that we can put into the simulator. And it's also a very good radar procedures trainer. Once you go through the RTU then, which lasts about 6 months, you go to your gaining unit, like the 318th, the final assignment type unit. Training here then, we call it IQT, Initial Qualification Training, and that training will last about 2 months. That's around 15 sorties or so. Some simulators, 13 to 15 sorties, and there's a check ride at the end of it, given by a flight examiner.
Now, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. The whole process then, I guess, from start to finish, pilot training is around not quite a year. You've got another 2 months on top of that, so that's a little over a year now. And then 6 more months in the F-15 schoolhouse. So a guy, from the time he walks into pilot training, I guess, the first day in pilot training, until he's done with the F-15 school, it's going to be somewhere around 1.5 years. And then after that, it's going to take another 2 months for the unit to get him up to their particular needs, okay? And then he's mission ready there. Then to get good with the airplane, it's going to take another year to a year and a half.
Prior to selection for Officer Candidate School, I was involved in the testing of the F-105, and that's when I got heavily interested in the flying side of the house. I got to see an exciting thing at Eglin when they tested the F-105. I worked as a tech rep, helped maintain that airplane. Gee, you have to understand those transistors were about as big around as a half a dollar for one transistor. They produced a lot of heat. They were very sensitive to heat. Most people didn't know how they worked at that point. Everything we had was vacuum tubes. Same time, they were testing the F-106 in the hangar right next to us, and it was all vacuum tubes. So they were sitting there testing the F-105 and the F-106 at the same time, 1957. And the challenge then was try to understand that whole F-106, that whole cockpit, how everything worked. Because that was an integrated airplane. That was different than... That was one of the first airplanes that come down the line that what we would call an integrated aircraft. They attempted to put everything together, and it would talk to the pilot through instruments in the cockpit, and it was fully automatic. Everything was fully automatic. He could select an automatic mode in the air, and the radar would take him down to a firing point that would the computers would automatically fire his weapons and give him a signal for him to break away, and everything was automatic. I was selected for and was the only civilian in the history of the Air Force that ever attended the Interceptor Weapons School at Tyndall Air Force Base. And when I went to that school, I got a better chance to see how the guy in the cockpit was using that airplane. I got a better feeling for what he was trying to do. I don't think I ever had a feeling for the fighter airplane and the guy in the cockpit and what he was trying to do with it. And especially the last few years, as I had spent all my time on the other side of the house trying to maintain what he was flying. And I began to approach maintenance from a different way. I begin to see it as an accomplishment of a mission, not for fixing airplanes. I think that was one of the problems with the F-15. For a lot of men that did not have a lot of education, when that airplane come out, they could sit down and tell you how things worked, but there was nothing to adjust. There's nothing to play with. It's all computerized, and if you don't understand, if you can't pick up a book and understand some of the mathematics that makes it work, it's just very difficult to work on it. The guy that flies an F-15, F-16 airplane has to be a smarter guy, I think, than the guy who used to fly the older airplanes. He's got to have more education. I say smarter, I don't mean IQ-wise. I mean, he's got to have more education, and he's got to work harder to know what's really going on.
First of all, you need, obviously, you need technical competence. Okay, he needs to understand the airplane, how it works, and then how to employ it. So there's a lot of things that are involved there. The basic, what owner's manual for the airplane is about this thick. Okay, and that's just the airplane, not the weapons. Weapons manuals, we've got 2 or 3 of them that are about that thick, plus some tactics manuals, which is a stack of books about this high. And so a guy's got to understand, and nobody can know all that, certainly, all the time, but he's got to be technically competent. Second of all, it's sort of a special attitude, I think, that a fighter pilot has that is brought about by his training. Our job is to go to war. Our job is to punch holes in real estate. So I want a guy that's aggressive. Pilots are by nature type A personalities. Fighter pilots are probably type A's, I guess you could say. He needs to be aggressive. He needs to. He has to be a team player, because in today's combat, you can't have any lone wolves. He has to be part of a team. The airplane, if an F-15 can do so much, one F-15 can do so much damage, you put a pair of F-15s out there, and you've really just multiplied the capability of that airplane, or that flight now, by probably a factor of 4. Those 2 pilots working together. So you have to know people. That's why we spend a lot of time around each other. We work hard, and we like to play hard. And those are the qualities that really make a good fighter pilot. He can be technically competent, but unless he's got the attitude and the motivation to go along with that skill, then a lot of times he's not going to be the best pilot in the squadron. I think so, because again, we're an air superiority organization, and I've dropped bombs before, but I'm going to speak to air superiority. And if you talk to a guy that drops bombs for a living, he'll tell you the same thing. There's a lot of satisfaction about going out and meeting a simulated enemy, or a dissimilar type aircraft, or even a similar another F-15, a similar airplane, and going out and doing your job well and besting not so much the airplane, but the pilot that's in there. And we also learn from that. That's why we spend so much time on training. An average sortie, even though it lasts an hour and 15 to an hour and a half, we'll spend as a minimum usually 5 to 6 hours on it. And that's just in the pre-flight preparation, going out and actually flying the sortie, and coming back where the real learning takes place is we sit down and we draw all the lines of who went where and when shots were taken and what we could have done better. And that's where the real learning comes in, is figuring out what you had done wrong, how you could do it better, then incorporating that into the next sortie that you have. Yeah, the neat thing about this squadron is that because we are kind of isolated out here in the Great Pacific Northwest, there aren't too many other active duty fighter bases around us. And we don't have another squadron or whatever to get together with. We've done a lot as far as tactics development go in the BVR war. When I got here, we were doing more, I think, than most other folks in the F-15 community were with BVR work. That's beyond visual range, employment of the AIM-7, and then how to defend against also a radar missile that's been shot at you. The squadron did a lot of work on that. We went to Red Flag a year and a half ago in June of '88. And we were the Red Force there. We were defending some 150,000 square miles of range space. Well, we had some help. We weren't doing it all by ourselves, but we would fly either 4 or 6 of our F-15s twice a day. And we had the Air Force aggressors who were flying F-5s also on our side. And we got, I think, a very nice compliment from those guys, saying that we were the best they'd ever seen to date in this beyond visual range employment and defense. So that was a nice kudo that they laid on us. Well, a lot of times people think that fighter pilots get all the glory and they have all the good times and all that sort of thing. And maybe that's true, I don't know. But if the maintenance organization doesn't fix them, then we certainly can't go out and fly them. And the 318th has had a very good and enviable record as far as aircraft maintenance. Last year, we won the Air Force Outstanding Maintenance Effectiveness Award for the entire United States Air Force in our category, which is consolidated aircraft maintenance. That's a pretty unique compliment for a squadron like this. We've met or exceeded everybody's standards as far as the maintenance yardsticks go. And the chief of maintenance would be a better guy to talk to about this to list them for you. But the 318th has pretty much been on top as far as maintaining the airplanes and keeping them in good shape and meeting our monthly sortie quotas.
We only do one thing in the Air Force, and we fly airplanes. And everybody in the Air Force is there for but one purpose, and that's to make sure that the airplane flies. That's all it's for. If we didn't have airplanes, we wouldn't have an Air Force.
The chief of maintenance actually owns the airplane. The pilot kind of goes out and rents it for a while, if you will. When we go out to fly, there's a book of forms that detail all the maintenance actions that have been done on the airplane since the last time it flew. And the pilot will review that, and he'll do a cursory, or not a cursory, but a walk-around inspection of the airplane to make sure it's in flyable condition, which it is anyway, otherwise they wouldn't give it to you. But then the pilot signs the form saying that he accepts the airplane. And then basically it's his airplane after he accepts it. But the chief of maintenance physically owns the airplanes, and then after him, the squadron commander owns the airplanes.
It's still hard to believe that they're closing that squadron. It has a camaraderie that I haven't seen anywhere else. I've been in a lot of units. I've been associated with the military since 1952, either as an officer, an enlisted man, or as an active civilian. And I have never seen the thing that happened in the 318. And you say to me, how do you pin it down? Well, I just can't pin it down to one thing. It's many things. I know, talking to many senior officers in many places, where they used to say, the one place that people wanted to be a commander of was the 318th. Maybe it was that. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's the part that we only got the very best. Not just the commanders, but the chiefs of maintenance, the maintenance officers, the the maintenance NCOs, the operations NCOs. But we always had, there's always been people there that make something go. That squadron has always had that. And maybe other squadrons have. They come from other squadrons, so they must have them, they've had to have them everywhere else. Now, I can't think of one person that I would think of more. That I think if there's any people I think about that had a greater effect on everything in the squadron, it's been the commanders.
Really?
Yeah, as I watched the different commanders come and go, yeah, I can look back and there were some that were just great leaders. Great leaders.
The thing that's probably made the job for me unique, and I've been, this is my 4th fighter squadron, and all of them have been excellent. My first one in Okinawa, the 67th TAC Fighter Squadron, the 58th TAC Fighter Squadron in England, then the world famous and highly respected Triple Nickel at Luke when I was an instructor there. All had unique things that made them outstanding. The thing about the 318th, and actually it's been about all of them, that's what makes the Air Force, I think, a neat place to be, are the people that you get the opportunity to work with. The airplanes are machines. The avionics are electronic circuit boards. The people that maintain those, that make them work right. If they were proud of the squadron then, they'd be even prouder of it now. Because in August, we went on a 2-week trip to Hawaii. First time the 1st Air Force unit has gone overseas on a deployment. We fought the Marine Corps F-15s there out of Kaneohe Bay and did well. After we got back, we figured that was going to be our last hurrah. The Air Force Fighter Weapons School, it's our equivalent, I guess, of the Navy Top Gun School. It was in the movie. Called up, and they run all the different types of fighter airplanes through there. And the F-16 division called us up and wanted some adversary support for an air-to-air phase they were going through. That's a compliment that these people would even call you because they're, it's a tough course, and they want the best adversaries they can get. We hadn't planned on that. We didn't have the money for it. They said, we can pay for it. And so we took a small package down there and spent 2 weeks at Nellis in September fighting those guys. That was a compliment. Again, we did well down there. I mean, that was a compliment to go down there. Even as the squadron was winding down, we flew our last sorties the middle of November. People didn't quit. As pilots, and we were doing 2 a day, as pilots were leaving or having their last sorties, we had everybody in the building out there to I guess, give them their traditional going away. Hose them down and give them a bottle of champagne and pat them on the back, and, people just didn't quit.
I watched the closure ceremony, and I watched very senior officers who I happen to know are that kind of people, and watched tears run down their face. Those things are very, very, very special to them. And if you said to them tomorrow, hey, we need you, and there's probably not much chance you're going to come back, they'll go in a drop of a hat. They really are. There really are those people. It's a different world. How do I explain it? I don't know whether you can explain it. When the skies are blue and it looks like there's no end to it, you can remember what it's like to be there. And when you have those gorgeous days, you want to fly. You just want to fly.